everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy, I'm the host of the show, and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How is everyone? That intro was energetic enough that Mabel, my dog, was just falling asleep, and suddenly she ran out of the room. How are you doing? Exhausted? I'm exhausted. But hey, that's life in America in 2024. So, learn to love it. But you know what you don't have to learn to love, because you automatically will love it? Today's episode with Nico Capitan. And if you don't know who Nico is, I'm going to tell you his bio right now. Originally from Evanston, Illinois, musician Nico Capitan had been writing songs since he was a teenager and formed Friko with his bandmate Bailey Minzenberger in 2019. After self-releasing a number of singles and EPs, the band signed with ATO Records, and in mid-February, just a little while ago, ATO released their debut album, Where We've Been, Where We Go From Here, and folks, it is a delight. And this talk was pretty interesting. First, I should say a note about the sound. Nico didn't have the ability to Zoom with me and record his end at the same time, so we were kind of at the whims of the internet connection, which wasn't that great. But I thought that even with the sound issues, I edited a lot of it out, but even with the sound issues, it was worth putting this episode up because, here's the deal. I found out early in the interview that Nico was 24. I usually don't know, unless I know the person I've been talking to for, unless I followed them for decades. I don't really know relatively how old they are. And I because of the concept of the show, I do have mixed results with people under the age of, 30. That's arbitrary, but late 20s, early 30s, something like that. I think back to when I was that age. I was super repressed. I couldn't talk about my emotions. I couldn't be honest about my own dreams and desires, especially my existential ones. And at that time, I was a decade away from being in therapy. I don't know if I've said it here. I've certainly said it on my other podcast, Couples Therapy, that I do with my wife, Naomi. But a blanket apology, just absolute blanket apology for anyone that I knew before, 28? It's about when I moved to New York and kind of settled. So, blanket apology to you all if you're listening. But anyway, knowing all the stuff, something that is very interesting in this that Nico and I get into is what it's like to be creative, a creative person when you mostly grew up in a declining America, right? Like the 21st century is just a laundry list of collapsing empire shit. Bush v. Gore, 9/11, Iraq, subprime mortgage crisis, foreclosure crisis after that, Trump, COVID. I know I'm probably glossing over a lot of other stuff. Didn't we just recently pass the 1.5 degrees Celsius barrier for global warming? Impending fascism, Gaza. That's a lot for this to all be your childhood into your early 20s. So we talk about what is it to create on the decline. And I thought that was very interesting. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Nico's cool, and I really love this album. All right, I'll make the rest of this intro very quick. You can find me on social media, mostly Blue Sky and Instagram. Yeah. What do you say about Twitter? The fact that Elon Musk has always been a piece of shit, but just an outright white supremacist at this point. I guess I am still there. But mostly jokes on Blue Sky and pictures of the animals and Naomi, and some comedy videos on Instagram at Andy Beckerman. Coming up on the show, I just did a fantastic interview with Peyton Pinkerton, who is the main songwriter behind New Radiant Storm King. He was a force behind a lot of the non-Malkmus Silver Jews albums, Pernice Brothers. Really interesting guy. We talk a lot about mental health issues and a ton of other things. So look forward to that next week. But for now, let's talk to Nico. Wait, Nico, how do you say your last name?
Capitan.
Capitan. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Because there's time you ever like you ask someone that and then you repeat it back completely wrong and they're like, I just said it to you. What?
Oh, it's all good. I mean, like the Greek Capitan is much more honest. I'm not gonna act like I'm that Greek.
Do you do you ever visit family in Greece and then try to really like get it accented up?
I've never been to Greece. It is a dream of mine, but yeah.
How far removed? At what point did your family come over here?
So my dad's side is Greek. I'm half Greek, and his mom and dad came over when they were in their like 20s.
Okay.
So I'm like twice removed.
Right. Second generation? Is that what it's?
Second or third.
That stuff always confuses me.
Yeah.
Wait, how old are you two?
24.
20. Oh, wow. You're young. Okay.
Yeah. Interviews can be tough with that because you never know when they're from and some of them get it wrong.
Well, it's just like you're young enough that you very well could be facing a uncertain future in terms of roll the dice, pick it, fascism, climate change, pandemic related shit. So I'm just curious if you've thought about that or if you're just like, I'm going to just put that in a sealed box in the back of my brain and I'll deal with that later because it's too much to deal with now.
No, I mean, we all talk about it a lot. It's something that like when we get to the point where like music has us covered on rent and like our basic, life finances, then we want to do what we can to give back, whether that be to other musicians that were around, but just like the community around us. Cause it's like, there are all these big scale issues, but in the end, like if you can just like focus on the community around you, at least at first, that's like all you can do. Cause these issues are bigger, too big to comprehend at times, but just, whatever the fuck we can do. It's scary for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, I've been thinking about lately, I'm about 15 years older than you. And I've been thinking about I'm just like, what does it fucking matter in terms of making art? And I know it does matter in some sense because I know that that I've had people tell me like, oh, whatever thing they're talking about that I've done, they're like, it's helped me. And I'm not saying that. I always feel like I'm, what's the word I'm looking for? Being self-aggrandizing or something like that. When I'm like, oh, this thing I've made, someone said it helped them. But I have gotten those compliments before, so I guess it's fair to say. But in the face of, like, my wife and I are, we live in Los Angeles, and we're like, we can't even afford a house here. So we're like, do we just give this all up and move to, I don't know, where? Where can you get away from whatever is going to happen to us? And it's just been very, I don't know. I've been weighing these things of is it worth it to make art as things collapse? And I don't know. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't know if you have an answer either, but it's just something that I've been pondering a lot lately, 3 a.m.
Yeah. I think it's definitely, you can relate it almost to like the smaller scale of the whole world ending, relating it to like when COVID happened and like people like, should we be making art when like COVID's happening and there's so many other things that need to be done? And it's like, people are like, well, yeah, we definitely should be. And like, but those people who are making art, you need to do it for the right reasons. And like, if you get to a point where you're an artist where it's like, if you have a lot of like extra means, then helping out how you can. And like, and even in the process of doing that, like doing what you can, but there's always, even if the world was about to end, I think people would want there to be art. I mean, because it's the only thing like in those times that can help people other than like direct, like either doctors, politicians aren't going to fucking help anybody. So like, yeah. A lot of the time artists can act as like mini politicians too. And you've seen in the past where a lot of artists have actually been some of the better quote unquote like politicians. Like Nina Simone in the past or like folks like that just done a lot to bring stuff to light.
I mean, I'm not asking this to start off in despair, but if you're 24, you became fully conscious as a human, like post 9/11. Like I had a
Yeah.
full childhood before 9/11 happened. And, or like for me, like the real demarcation is Bush v. Gore, because that was when the mask started to really kind of come off, because it was just like the Supreme Court just stopped the recount. And I've been taking that as the kind of like point, or where it's like, oh, okay, so they're not going to pretend anymore. But then you grew up in this world, and I'm kind of curious, what makes you want to make art in a world that is kind of fucked up in a way that it wasn't when I was a kid in the 80s and the 90s?
I mean, I think it's just like, especially after COVID happened, so many things, so many more things being brought to light, just kind of the urgency of right now, and like of people around my age feeling that. There's just like, and a lot of the bands that I love right now that are doing it, there's like, I love just like expressing that urgency in the music. And like, whether you're making political music is nearly impossible. Making like direct political music, like maybe like Black Flag back in the day, it's really, really hard. But like, I always just want like the energy behind something to feel like it's something that's fighting against, all the shit. And it's like, I don't know. It's such a tough thing to do. Like I said, it's literally like, for us, like with this band, it's been like creating this space with ourselves where it's making our friends. Like first it was like us as a band, and like, bringing in the people closest around as friends to help them out with like, if they want to do music stuff, or like, like really you have to start small, because if everybody started small, it would work out. Because that is going to be in the end, like what either is do or die, because either like small communities will come together or they won't. Because it's a rough thing, and that's why we like to be Chicago focused, because it's like, it's you gotta have a focus point, or else you're just talking so broad like all these politicians, and you're not going to get anything fucking done. If everybody like focused on the one thing that they should be focused on, probably help a lot.
But I mean, like when let me just ask this. When did you first form any kind of intention, like, I want to make art, period? Whether it's for a living, whether it is for fun, whatever. Like, was it when you were a teenager? Was it in college? Like, at what point do you make this like actual choice?
I mean, I started writing music just because something to do when I wasn't at school in like middle school, and then into high school. That was literally just like, I immediately, for whatever reason. I think that's just like one of those things where something clicked. And then I really wanted to make a career of it right after I did 1 year at Columbia College Chicago. And I was like, this isn't working out for me. Like, this is not, like, I got denied from the Belmont University songwriting program. Then I went to Columbia College Chicago, and they said I should switch out of the vocal program because I wasn't good for that. And it's like, I was like, if I gotta make this album happen, it's gotta be complete self-determination, and just like, building a community around all this, whatever this music we make, that's just good for everyone involved. And so, yeah, I dropped out of college and I got a job at a warehouse I've been working at since, still working out for the past 9 years, and just done music. And that was when I was like 19. Is when that happened too.
Okay. So let's go back to middle school then, and we'll move up to this. What is it in middle school that makes you want to, because this is a question I have for most of my guests. There are millions and millions of people who listen to music, are fans of music. That's, on the low end, right? We're talking billions. A fraction of those are people who go from, oh, I like this, to I want to do this myself. What was it in you where you're like, oh, I want to do this myself? Or what inspired you to be like, okay, I want to start writing songs myself?
I definitely just felt like I could say something I couldn't say in the everyday. And like, at that time, it was, whatever issues I was having in middle school, like, it was like my feelings over just like some, like, like girl that I liked or something. And then like in middle school, like in early high school, like, when I started, dealing with whatever part of mental illness it may be, just like coping with that and like how to get that out. And then like getting older from that, like expressing, love for the people around you that you couldn't express in real life. And it's just kind of getting that out in a way because music is so and stuff that's too abstract feels pretentious. And it's meeting those 2 points.
Well, let me ask, are you someone who is able to actually express your emotions to people, or are you someone who represses them?
I mean, it's definitely, there's so many emotions for everybody, no matter how vulnerable or how much they put themselves out there. There's things that they feel deeply. And like everybody feels this depth to themselves that nobody else will ever really. And like anybody who makes art is trying to, put that out there, I think.
But like, can you specifically do it? Like, do you have a family where you are like, where you feel comfortable telling your parents about what you're feeling? Or is that like, for example, for me, when I was younger, my family, we could express love. Like we could tell each other we loved each other, and we could definitely tell each other, like we could be angry around each other, but we couldn't really discuss emotions. We couldn't really discuss those kinds of things. And it wasn't like specific, like it wasn't like, they weren't like, you can't do this. It's just like, you didn't do it. My parents are boomers, and it wasn't something that they did with their parents. And so it just didn't seem like something that, I was always weirded out when my friends had like parents who were kind of like hippies. And I'm like, you talk about things. So can you talk about stuff with your family?
That was something that probably the last like 5 or 6 years became more of like a easier thing to talk about because it definitely wasn't. Because I mean, my dad and mom had the same thing with their parents for sure. But as of the past like 5 or 6 years, it's definitely I can talk about most things with them and like. I mean, growing up, it was probably the same as like anybody growing up with like somebody with my age of parents, like in their 50s or so now. Where it's that middle point where it's like nobody's like, you can't talk about this, but it doesn't feel comfortable too. And once you get older, there's some things you want to discuss with your parents, some things you don't. But like, it's a balance to keep that relationship good. It's kind of like how with your parents, like once I finally moved out, my relationship with my parents got so much better. Like when I was 19 living with my parents, it was tough because of course it's going to be.
Because I guess what I'm trying to get a picture of is writing a song like the only way you can express yourself, or do you have other outlets? Like, can you actually talk deeply with your friends? Are you someone who was in therapy? Things like that. Like, where do you have other outlets, or is it just like, okay, this is my chance to actually express myself?
Yeah, I mean, especially now, like while making this record, I mean, I've got great friends with the band and like great partner and my parents have been great and like just I've had a lot of good people around me my whole life and a lot of that darkness just came internally and that's where a lot of the darkness in the record comes from, I think. But also there's so much joy and that comes from the relationships with the people around me because I do have those outlets, but there's always stuff that just stays within you, I think. And it's impossible to put into words. And like music can make that make sense, make that impossible thing make more sense.
Like, what is something that you could only talk about in a song that you wouldn't feel comfortable maybe talking about with friends or a loved one?
I don't know, just some of like the really darker stuff. I won't get into it too much, but like, with where we've been, there's definitely some darker references. And it's like, I'm in a much better spot in my life now because honestly, of making this record and like the people that have come along the way because of it. But yeah, it's, yeah, it gets dark, but rather not discuss it too in depth with that stuff.
Have you ever been a therapy person?
Yeah, I am into therapy. I've had a couple therapists in my life. It's always been good. I can only do it with women.
Okay.
Yeah. It's definitely like a father thing where it's like you don't feel as comfortable with men. But I love my. I can talk to him. I won't say anything now, but you know, you know how it is.
I do. I've been in therapy for 10 years now, I think. A little over.
Same therapist.
Two different ones cuz I had one therapist in New York, and then when we moved to Los Angeles, I stopped going to therapy for a couple years, and then I was just like, I should do this again. And so I started going to therapy here. So two different ones. And like my first one was much more empathetic, and my second one is very Freudian, and she's very much like I can't really ask her questions about herself. Not that I'm like interested, but it's just like, there'll be things where I am like, do you think this is nuts, this what I'm saying? And she's like, why do you think that's important? And I'm like, no. I need you to don't reflect this back on me. I think it's important because I'm talking to you and I pay you money to talk with me.
Yeah.
And so I want your opinion. I don't need you to be but she's just like this mirror that just like keeps trying to reflect stuff back at me. And I like that less, but yeah, I don't know what your experience is.
Yeah, you need a person. You need a person in the room. You can't feel like you're just talking to, yeah, like someone who's just reciting Freudian psychology.
Yeah. Okay. So wait, are you born in Chicago? Like Chicago proper?
So me and Billy were born in Evanston. This is the first suburb north of Chicago. It borders Chicago. But we just say Chicago for people not from Illinois because it's easier.
I know.
And we've lived in Chicago 5 years now.
I know Evanston. That's where Lauren Lapkus is from.
Who's that?
Actor, podcaster, and comedian. Lauren Lapkus, I think, went to.
Cool.
Because isn't the like one of the high schools there like a real arts high school?
Yeah, I think there is a Montessori. I'm not sure though.
Like, what is Evanston like? Is it a small town? Is it, I mean, what is it to grow up there?
I mean, it's a big, small town. It's Chicago. Like we'd go to Chicago all the time to hang out. So it really didn't feel like we were growing up in a suburb because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it has that suburban feel where it's like, you're like 14, just like biking around here from just going to CVS and then just biking to another park. And it had the lake. It was nice, but I very much enjoy Chicago proper over it, especially at my age now. But it was a nice place to grow up.
Was it boring? Your childhood sounds like mine, which was we hung out in parking lots. We played outside. We played hockey in Walmart parking lots. We drove to Blockbuster. This is how old I am. We drove to Blockbuster and then got Crazy Bread from Little Caesars and then drove around some more and then played video games. And that seems to be like the length and breadth of growing up in the suburbs.
Yeah, that's it, man. I mean, because like, especially before any of us could drive, when we were just biking. I mean, sometimes we'd bike to like Rogers Park, but it's like we couldn't bike that far in the city, or we'd take the L. That's the other thing is Chicago's really good public transport, and you've got like a few L stops in Evanston that take you around. So that was always a fun thing to do growing up too.
So do any of your friends, like, do you have any ambitions at this age? Like, are there things you want to do? Or are there things your friends want to do?
I mean, the music and the songs come first always. And we'll always put some, but I mean, just seeing with how this year's shaping up for us, I mean, if music's just going to be a way to see the world, then that is something I'm loving and just want to take in because, and feel grateful for that.
Yeah. But I mean, when you were growing up,
just such an exciting thing.
Like when you were a teenager, was it always like, I want to be in a band? Or was it like, oh, you know what? I like music. It's nice. But you know what I really want to be is as an engineer or whatever.
I always had that gut feeling that the only thing I could do is music. I'd always joke with my friends, like I'd either be doing music or I'd be just doing nothing, like literally. But so I kind of always had that feeling. It always just felt like the only thing that I could do. And the only thing that I obsessed over. And like when you find something that you obsess over, then that's kind of the right thing.
Did you think you could do it too? Because I think those are the two things that people need, right? Like I both didn't know I wanted to do. I didn't want to write or make music or whatever I do. I didn't know it, and I didn't know you could do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely did not understand how it could be a realistic thing. It felt so foreign. And like, I mean, I spent the past like 3 or 4 years trying to figure out how that's possible. Only in the past year, since we've gotten, it started with our booking agent from Chicago. He came and saw a show in Chicago. And, from there, he introduced us to lawyer and then we get manager, and eventually label. I've seen like how it actually can be possible. And that being possible is like insane to me because it's like there was never like, you're never really like, oh, I can do this. And it's always like, well, I'm really obsessed with this. I guess I'm just going to keep doing it. So just you put enough time in and it can work out, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I it's so weird. Like I think it's definitely class based. At least especially being here in Los Angeles and I get to see a lot of it up front. I think if people come from wealthier backgrounds, there just tends to be this kind of like, oh yeah, well I know how this works. I forget. I was listening to an interview with Nicole Holofcener, who is a kind of indie director. I mean, she directs TV and a lot of stuff, but her films are like basically kind of like, I mean, even though like Julia Louis-Dreyfus is in like half of her films, but like they're indie in quotes. And her stepfather was like a famous manager and a famous producer type person. And I remember when I heard that interview, I was like, oh, well, she knew how all this stuff worked from an early age because she was introduced into this world by her stepfather. And I never had that. And so I think there's definitely I definitely think like if you come from a certain background, this just feels normal. Whereas the rest of us are just like, what the fuck? How do you do this? Where do I go?
Well, I mean, it's like nepotism is in the entertainment industry. I mean, it's more entertainment industry than anything else. But like me and Bailey being completely oblivious. I mean, Bailey's dad studied some guitar in college and was a gigging musician for a little while. But he never, it never became a full-time career for him. And my parents growing up just owned breakfast lunch diners. And that's actually the fun thing with that is that's how Matt Walker came to the diner once, and then it all, it leads to something over time, but they had no idea how it works, but they were just supportive, and like, it's just, I mean, it shows you that like, it's about time put in and just like the people involved, just caring, and it can, if that adds up, it can work out add up to more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, this is the thing that I see, at least out here, is that I've seen plenty of very talented people just not be able to make a living or be able to do what they want to do. And it has nothing to do with their talent or their dedication. It just has to do with like the structures of like the business here. And I'm kind of curious, what made your parents so supportive? Because I do think that is a piece of the puzzle. Because if the business is very difficult or opaque or you don't know how to do it, you need something to kind of like buoy you, right? And at those early stages, it has to be like someone giving you positive reinforcement.
I mean, and that was totally just. I mean, my dad was a hobbyist musician and has been a hobbyist musician, guitarist, so life. He still plays in a couple cover bands in Evanston, actually. But he wanted to do music growing up. So I think that's why he has been so supportive. My mom, I mean, she loves music. She loves the music that she loves. She's not like a huge music person, but she's always been like a free spirit growing up. She went to college for a year and dropped out when she was a kid. She was always getting in trouble and shit. So I think she understands wanting to live this lifestyle. And, they have definitely been a buoy. And like from ages when I was making music from like 14 and 18, probably the only people that heard the music was my dad. And he was a very positive reinforcement in that.
When you said your mom would like get in trouble, like just run of the mill mischief, or is she just not interested in? I'm trying to think of like how old your parents would be. Like your parents would be in their
mid-50s,
in their 20s. But I'm saying like she's like what, like a teenager in the 70s into the 80s.
80s. They were like 80s to the core. Yeah.
So like what does she do? Like hair metal? Like what kind of mischief is she getting into?
I mean, I don't know enough about her childhood too much. I just know that her parents were very, like came from deep America. Like my grandpa like moved up to Chicago, and then from like super poor like farming family in the South, and then like got a job and worked there for 60 years. And they were very an American family, and her brother was a very smart guy who was very well behaved and everything, and she was just like a mischief child. That's all I know. I don't know enough about her childhood, but all I know is from stories from my grandparents and from her is she was just a troublemaker and kind of free spirit type.
So that translates into her parenting then. She's a little more lax probably as a parent.
Yeah, I mean they were always, I wasn't I wasn't completely unleashed when I was like a kid, but they were never too strict, and they definitely never restricted me with like what I could do with my life.
Like, did you have something before music even entered your life? Did you have something you wanted to be?
Let me probably a professional soccer player, because that was probably when I was like 12.
You were a soccer kid?
I played soccer all the way till the end of high school. Actually, I still love the game. It's a great sport, and I love the fashion. And especially the shoe fashion.
Okay. So at what point do you go from appreciating music to writing music? Like at what point do you pick up a guitar or a piano or whatever?
I mean, the first instrument, I would play around on my parents' piano when I was really young. But when I was in like 5th grade, I expressed interest in wanting to play the drums because my dad always played Led Zeppelin when I was growing up, and I was obsessed with John Bonham. And so they got me a starter Pearl kit, and I did that for a few years. I played in the cover band with friends in middle school, and that was very developmental for me because we'd play like a couple shows a month. It was just like block parties and at like the local like bar and grill in Evanston. And yeah, that was all just like great experience live, because then by the point we get to now with live shows, it's like I find like some labels are like still trying to put together bands my age and like music that they're putting out like their live show. I'm like, what the like, how the fuck do you sign these people and they don't know how to play a live show? That's my feeling on it. It's like, if you're a rock band, man, you should. I'm just glad we have that experience, because it's like the live show is the core of it, So yeah.
Is that a problem? I didn't even know that was a thing. That bands are becoming bands without having any kind of like, well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on how old you are. I know when I was in a band in college, I was terrible on stage. I was not good at banter. And Nico, you know this. It's so easy to get an audience to laugh at something if you're a musician.
Yeah, but banter's hard, dude. I don't like it either.
I remember one time I saw Ben Gibbard at Town Hall in New York, and he said something that was not funny at all, and the audience just erupted in laughter. And my wife and I looked at each other, and we're like, we work so hard just for a single laugh on stage, and this guy just plays some piano and then says one thing afterwards, and everyone's uproarious.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, with that, like, the audience wants to laugh. And with someone like Ben Gibbard, they're going to laugh at it, It's like, oh, you're Ben Gibbard.
I'm just saying, you got it easy. You're out here. You can just say whatever you want on stage. You got it easy.
It's freaking... Oh, wait. Oh, do you do comedic stuff?
Yes. Yeah, no. I came up doing comedy in New York. And writing.
I can imagine doing that, man. I'm not trying to ever do that.
Hey, but you're in Chicago. Hey, you got all those improv theaters.
Chicago's the core of it.
You got IO. You got Second City. You got Annoyance. What else is out there?
It's iconic. I mean, I know all those. I don't know anymore though. I've seen some great shows there though.
But you had all this. But I think that is interesting. You already had this experience playing out as a teenager, and not just like, I don't know. I played my Temple's talent show. We played like a Pavement song at a nursing home. Like that was most of my experience before going to college and starting a band with some friends. And so I didn't have anything by the time that I was actually playing real shows. I didn't have any kind of stage presence because I didn't have anything that happened in high school. It's the same thing like when I started doing improv. I didn't have any acting stuff before that. And so it took me like 5 years to get good because I didn't have that thing that you had as a teenager, which is like, oh, I already kind of know what I'm interested in. And so I'm going to get this experience when I'm young so that by the time I hit my early 20s, I actually have some kind of stage presence.
Yeah, it was very fun, man. Like I was on the drum, just being in a band with your close friends, like it just teaches you about that dynamic and how hard that can be and fun at times.
When do you think you actually gained some kind of stage, I'll just say stage presence, like some like kind of like I have confidence on stage and I can kind of like push that? I don't even know how to describe this, but you know, like when you see someone who's confident on stage and it kind of just creates this field around the entire venue. When do you think you gained that?
I mean, I would say before it was confidence, just like once I came out from behind the drum set and like when I started writing songs of my own and I fronted the band maybe in like junior year of high school when we started doing original music, I kind of, at that time I was like insane because I was out in my face. I was, doing the twist. I was doing the fucking splits on stage. I was like full glam rock. And like, I don't know. That's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how I did that back then. Because like now I love to put on a show and perform, but I mean, I love to have a guitar with me while doing that. But back then I was just singing. I don't know. It always felt right. Like I was the type to always be in front of the mirror and like practice moves back in like when I was like 17, 18. And like, yeah, I don't know. I just always loved the performer part of everything.
Is it at that age? See, I think one of the reasons why I was never good at that part of it is because I felt I was too self-aware and I felt too much shame and I felt too embarrassed doing any of that kind of stuff. Did you feel that and you pushed past it, or did you never feel that kind of thing? Like whatever, doing like a windmill or something like that, if that's what you would do. I don't know. But like, did you ever feel embarrassed, or was it that you were able to like kind of push past that to become that kind of performer?
It's interesting. Like I wouldn't do a lot of the stuff that I did when I was like 18, 19, because now it wouldn't feel honest. But it felt honest at the time for whatever reason, because it felt like it didn't feel like I was pushing past anything. I've always been the type that likes making a joke out of myself and what I'm doing for other people's enjoyment, not in like a comedian's way, but like in the way, especially if I'm like, if I can be the butt of the joke for other people's enjoyment, that feels good to me. And like, even now on stage, like just doing silly stuff, like just vibrating your body really fast and moving around the stage is shit that David Byrne would do. Mm. It's like, that stuff is just as cathartic as like a sad song to people, because it's like, oh my God, like that's great. You're doing it up there. But like, the thing with that is, especially if you're like my age where you're older, you need to have the songs to back that up. If you're playing music that's not good and doing that shit, it's not worth anybody's time, So that's why Freddie Mercury worked for Queen, because they had great songs. But that shit would have been ridiculous if they didn't have good songs.
Right. I think you hit upon something too, is that it comes from an honest place. For me to do something like that, it would come from a fake place. And that's why it doesn't work, or I can't do it. Right. But for you, it just kind of like emerges out of who you are. Like you enjoy that in some dimension.
Yeah. Like Stephen Malcolmus never do that shit, just everybody's different, whatever comes out naturally.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I guess I'm getting back to like some of the stuff that we started talking about, which is feeling comfortable in your own skin, or feeling comfortable being emotive in public, or in a public, not just live, but like in a public place, like in a front facing place, like making music for other people to hear. You are comfortable in that. You are comfortable doing that. And I'm guessing from what you've said that it comes from starting so early, having this experience in high school. Is that true? Or am I just kind of like...
Yeah. No, it definitely does. Because I mean, like 3 or 4 years of playing before you even are fronting a band, playing your own music is kind of just like it's at the roots of that confidence and like happiness on stage.
Happiness on stage. That's a great way of putting it. What made you want to come out from behind the drum set? Was it out of necessity, like someone who played guitar had to leave, or was it some kind of internal feeling in you?
It was somebody actually at first somebody we kicked out our first guitarist because we just wasn't good for the band, and then that was in like freshman year of high school, and then I started playing up front before we even started doing originals yet. And then I started writing the songs. So I would, be singing most of the stuff. Yeah. Mostly when I started writing the songs was when it became like, that's when I'm going to need to be the front person on this stuff.
Can you take me through, if you can remember, like what was it to go from hi, we're playing covers of, I don't know, whatever, Pavement, whatever you were doing, to now I'm writing, I decide I'm going to write my own songs. Like, what was that process for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been writing music, like I said, since I was like 14, but we never played any of it because I was too self-conscious. And then when I was like 17, I wrote this one song that's on our EP, Holding On People, and we still play live today. Some of my favorite songs to play live. But I put that song out there, and that was the first thing where it's like close friends and some people at high school were like, oh, wow, I fuck with this song. And I was like, oh, shit, like, that's crazy. And then that was the point, like, was kind of like, all right, well, let's start doing this stuff live maybe. And just went from there, I think.
So it was other people, it was giving you positive reinforcement where you're just like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah, outside of like my dad.
Did he hear the songs before you even started playing them for other people?
Yeah, I mean, he was hearing them from the beginning.
Did he get what you're doing, or was it just like, oh, this is my son, he's kind of like living out the dream I wanted, so I'm just going to give him the positive reinforcement? Or do you think he like understands it?
I think at first it definitely had to have just been support because it's not like it was anything great at first, but it definitely, quickly became something that he was truly supportive of. By the time I was 17, and, I'd recorded, we have this demos album on streaming, the Burnout Beautiful demos. And that's all I recorded that all myself in the basement of my parents' home. And they kind of just saw me down there so much, just obsessing over all this stuff. I think they just took a genuine, interest in it. And I do think it was genuine. Maybe not from the top, but after like a couple years, they were like, oh, this is like, he really means it, whether there were good songs yet or not. I still think when I was 17, Holding On People is the first actual like, good song I wrote. Everything before that wasn't really a song, I'd say.
Do they get it though? Do they like, I know I'm pushing at it, but I'm like, I'm really curious if they understand what you're doing, if that makes any sense.
No, I mean, now, definitely. I mean, I've seen them moved by it. They've expressed to me many times how much it's moved them. With this record especially, it's definitely very real.
That's very cool. Did you think you got, when you were younger, do you think you got a whiff of your dad's dreams? Like, did you know on any level that like, oh, he kind of wanted to do this?
Definitely. I mean, he always talked because his parents were like classic Greeks and like they owned a laundromat, of course. And like he was working there and his dad just he was like, you're either going to become a lawyer or a doctor. It's like the classic, like,
yep,
from Europe just coming over. And so, he went to school, studied to be a lawyer. He hated it. And then he ended up opening the diners with my mom, which is a complete 180. So yeah. And like, he always loved playing music growing up. He had a band with my uncle in like the 80s. Very Cure-esque. He was a big Cure and like the Smiths fan at the time.
Really?
Yeah.
So okay. Because sometimes I'm very interested in parental regrets.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it wasn't a regret of his, but maybe it was definitely just a dream that he just never pursued. And how much that we as their children pick up on these things and then react to them, right? Because it's tough. Like if your parents have some kind of like unfulfilled wish in their lives, it does direct you in some way. And I don't think it's necessarily like it pushes you in that direction, but sometimes it can pull you. I realize that's very metaphorical, but do you know what I mean?
No, that's very true. I mean, it's kind of like the whole thing with like generational trauma. When you're growing up, you definitely become aware of that stuff quickly. I think that might have lit a fire in me for it too. Once I realized, like, once I was like, I'm gonna fully go for this. I do think that was a fire beneath me.
Interesting. So, okay, we're right at the end, and I kind of want to get back to something you had said earlier, where you said you had tried to get into some college. I forget what the name of it was. I'm going to say it started
Belmont University.
Belmont University. I was about to be like the guy from Castlevania. Belmont. Yes. Okay. So what's Belmont University like? What made you want to go there?
They just were known to have a good music program. Like, Nashville was Nashville.
Nashville.
Yeah.
Was it, I mean, what made you think that you needed the credentialization of like a music program? Was it your parents saying like you should go to college? Was it you felt like that would give you some kind of structure? Like, what made you want to do it in the first place?
It was definitely structure, because straight out of high school, I wasn't at the point yet where I was like, I'm going to get a job in a warehouse and work there for 4 years and just try music. It was structure. It was a quantification, I think, for my parents, being like, all right, well, this, he wants to pursue this very abstract thing, but at least there's some type of like quantification of this with a degree, if that ended up being got. But luckily, I got denied from that program, and so I ended up going to Columbia College Chicago, and then I spent a year there and dropped out.
Yeah,
stuff works out.
Well, what was that process like? Did you get there? You did a year, and you're just like, this is not going to help me. Was it that it was too constricting?
Yeah. I mean, it was like, this isn't going to help me. They were like, you should move on from the vocal program, and it was just like, I'm not getting anything from this, and it's fucking money, dude. It's like way too expensive.
Yeah,
there's no point for me to keep doing this.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. For real. When I was in grad school, I remember that one of the advisors and I were talking in my office at one point, and he was saying like, I don't think I would advise anyone younger than you to do this. I think I would advise them to get a job like as a plumber or something like that, and where they can do, if they want to do philosophical work. I was a philosophy major. If they want to do philosophical work, they could do it on the side, but like, this is not going to lead. And he was right. Like, everyone in of my cohort, of my friends, like one of them is a full-time professor now out of everyone. And everyone else is kind of like off. I mean, I went to go do comedy. So, but like, he's like, and I think we're getting back to like at the beginning again, where I'm just like, I'm curious about what it is to have fully matured in the 21st century, where all of these crises that when I was a kid were like far off in the distance. Like, I knew about climate change, but it was far off. It's like, oh, it'll probably happen after I am dead. And now I'm in middle age, and it's like, oh no, it's happening now. What is it to see all this stuff in like immediately as opposed to like in the future? Like, does that make you want to just like pursue your dreams? Like, was that part of it?
I mean, like I said, it adds a sense of urgency, and especially with COVID being like a real thing that happened that felt like the end of the world at the time.
Oh yeah, you were 20. Like, that's crazy. You were 20 when that happened.
Yeah, it was like one of the most, I mean, I had my 21st birthday, and that too is like, one of the most like formative years pocket of your life in that time frame. And I think it adds like everybody can feel that fragility to everything, and I think it makes people more compassionate too because of that fragility. And yeah, I mean, because that empathy and compassion is like, but not in like a corny way, like peace and love everybody, like genuine, like actionable type version of that, and like helping your community is the only way forward with that. Because yeah, I mean, I think our generation thinks about it in a very dark way. It's like, well, what can we do to fix this, because we're so young and like we're gonna have to deal with this? But yeah, I don't know, we talk about it all the time. There's a lot of depth to all the different subjects. It's so bad right now, and like I wonder sometimes if that's like, if that felt for everybody when they were in their early 20s, because everybody has that sense of like it's all falling apart when you're that age.
No,
but it doesn't seem like it felt this bad.
But that's the thing, it didn't. And that's why I'm like, there's this kind of, I don't know what you, not assumption. I don't know how to phrase this exactly, like, but there's this cliche that like the older you get, like you're always nostalgic about like, oh, things were better when you were younger. But I genuinely think that for everyone born after like, I don't know, 1975, something, whatever, pick your thing, that it literally was better when you were younger. And that the problems that you are facing as you get older, I did not have the urgency was not there when I was 24. Like, I think I was allowed to kind of float around and be a little more flaky because none of this felt real in a way that it does for you. And I wonder if that pushes, like you said, yes, we feel the urgency, but like, pushes you to be better earlier. I don't think that's answerable maybe, but like, I wonder if people are putting all of their energy into like whatever they're doing, like their first album, in a way, making that album better than a lot of other people. This makes no sense what I'm saying. I'm trying to say that like some people like, oh, by the time like a band really fully matures, that then they're hitting like a really like whatever Pavement. Sorry. I'm like looking at this Pavement thing and I'm like that, like Wowie Zowie is like they're full, like they're into it. Whereas like I wonder if everyone facing this urgency is like, we're going to put all of our stuff into this as early as possible. Does that even make any kind of fucking sense?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on it person to person, but I personally was like, when this first record needed to be like something that felt full and like all encapsulating of like all the emotions that we felt over the past few years. And yeah, you do feel genuinely limited time to try to help it, whatever can be done.
Yeah. All right. Well, Nico, thank you for joining me today. This is a delight to talk to you. I really enjoy the album a lot.
Thank you, Andy, for talking.
Yeah. All right. Have a great rest of your day.
You too, man.
And we'll see you next time. Bye. Bye, oh, 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 bye. Bye, bye, beginnings.